Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 26 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2022 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're recording. It's Sunday night, right before Sunday Night Football. And it was week 3, all right. It wasn't a super duper successful week 3 in terms of a lot of stars underperforming, but week 3 has happened.
I was thinking about this, like going into it right after we finished the live on Sunday, 8:30 a.m. every single Sunday. I feel like week 3 has been weird, like every year. Like the guys that boom week 1 and week 2, where you're like, oh, it's a surefire start, they always miss. And all the guys where you're like, yo, they were slacking week 1 and week 2, like you have to trade them. That's when they finally show up and perform. And we saw it with a lot of players, not everybody, but there was a lot of flip-flop, I feel like, from week 1 and 2 to week 3.
And we'll definitely talk about it. We have a weekend recap to talk about. We have some injuries we want to give you some updates on. Then we're going to give you some previews for Monday Night Football. That's why we do a Monday show. So if you have some guys on Monday Night Football, if you don't know what to expect, we give you some previews and maybe give you a sleeper or two that you could play if you need to. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. Maybe you're listening to us after watching our Sunday stream yesterday, which we really do appreciate. Thank you to everybody that viewed that and asked the question. We went for about an hour and a half because you guys kept on asking those questions, and we appreciate that. Those Sunday lives are every Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on our Facebook, our Twitter, and our YouTube, which you could be watching us on right now. So thank you for that. Keep on joining those live streams and keep on asking those questions on Sunday mornings. We appreciate that. But if this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. We do this show on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday every single week during the NFL season. And you can listen to us on all audio streaming platforms, including but not limited to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. If you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and a very quick review. We really do appreciate that. Even if you write, this show's great. Or even if you write, these guys are great, but they don't know what they're talking about. Something like that. We'd appreciate any of that. If you'd rather watch the show instead of just listening, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Give us a subscription, hit that subscribe, give us a like on the video. If you like this video, give us a comment. We'd appreciate all of that. If you want to follow us and interact with us on social media, and please do, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok is PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Going to start off with some injury updates and some news. Again, we're recording Sunday night about 7:50. So it's possible we don't have the latest injury information as to when you're actually listening to the show on Monday morning, but that's okay. We're going to try our best with what we got. Starting off, Dalvin Cook has a shoulder injury, and this is a lot to break down. First off, he went out in the fourth quarter with the shoulder injury, and Alexander Mattison took over. Then we find out that he actually dislocated his shoulder again, but he will be okay. Then we learned that it's an unrepaired lateral tear, and it said he wasn't wearing a harness. Apparently, he's supposed to be wearing a harness for this thing. This is something that none of us knew about. Like, I haven't heard of this. And I had heard a lot of fantasy analysts talk up Dalvin Cook before the season, and none of us knew about this. So apparently, his plan is, as of now, the plan is for Dalvin Cook to start next week against the Saints, which is a really tough run defense, and to wear a harness for his shoulder. So, Nick, how worried are you about Dalvin Cook at the moment?
So the way I described Dalvin Cook going into last year, as someone that owned him 2 years ago, was every single game where you watched Dalvin Cook, you felt like he had a season-ending injury. Like he was on the floor, he was missing back-to-back snaps, he was getting a ton of workload but wasn't delivering, and that's kind of what this feels like, where it's an injury, he missed the rest of the game. Team says he's good. He should be good if he's been dealing with this. He looked like a good runner. He looked like a great runner up until the injury. I think he had 96 yards.
He did. He almost got his 100-yard bonus.
He would have smashed through it if he stayed through the game, and Madison looked good in that run game. So I'm not overly worried, but if this becomes a recurring injury and it keeps inhibiting his time on the field, then I think you need to reevaluate. I think this is one we'll have to wait till later in the week to kind of give full analysis.
Yep, I totally agree. David Montgomery had an ankle/knee injury, I believe, on the first or second play of the game. It was really quick, and then he went out, and that sucks. That sucks because I had him as a boom of the week in my boom lineup. I'll be honest with you guys, when somebody doesn't boom or if somebody busts, I chalk this one up as a we're just going to slide it off because you can't predict an injury. But what I can predict is that the Bears running back was going to have a great game. Khalil Herbert had a day. Khalil Herbert, we'll talk about him in a little bit, had 20 carries for 157 and 2 touchdowns. If you're a David Montgomery owner, this sucks because it could have been Montgomery. Would he have those exact stats? No, they're different players. However, the opportunities would have been there for Montgomery. That does suck. You missed out on a great game from your player. The bright side, though, he did leave. He left after one player, and he's considered day-to-day. It's not considered serious. I'm not super duper worried about Montgomery's injury. If I'm a Montgomery owner, I am worried about Khalil Herbert, who's looked good in 2 out of 3 games that he's gotten opportunities in. So on your waiver wire this week, if Alexander Madison or Khalil Herbert's there, I think they're going to be 2 of the top waiver targets for this week.
Absolutely.
Lastly, Mac Jones, ankle injury. He limped off right at the end of the game. I think it was the last possession. He got x-rays on it, and it was negative. Are you worried about this at all?
A little bit, but once again, we'll be able to talk about it as the week goes on.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's get into a weekend wrap. We're going to talk about each game, give you our biggest takeaway from each game, one takeaway from each of us. Could be from either of the teams. Starting off with the Texans at the Bears. What is your biggest takeaway?
All right, I said it on our Sunday live. I had him as one of my starts of the week. Week 3 is when your rookies come to play. That's when you know if they are going to be started for the year. That's when you know if all the preseason hype, all that camp hype, all the rookie hype is actually true. And it was for Damien Pierce. 20 carries, 80 yards, 20 receiving yards, and a touchdown on 2 catches. Gave him 18 fantasy points in a really, really solid performance from him. He finally showed up to play at his most carries through 3 games. He has over 40 touches on the year right now. So clearly he is going to continue to be involved with this offense. Scoring the touchdown was because they were going up against the Chicago Bears. But the Texans have not looked terrible as a football team. They tied the Colts in week 1, and they came out here and they won against the Bears.
They're competing for a roster that's probably like bottom 5 in the league.
They lost to the Bears, but it was a close game. Like they were competing for most of the game. I think Pierce is going to be a good play. I think if you reached on him and were worried after week 1 and 2, I think there's a lot better days ahead after you see that kind of workload from that kind of running back.
All right. For me, I just spoke about Khalil Herbert a little bit, so I don't want to make that my super major point. I do want to note, though, that I'm a Khalil Herbert truther. I have him in Dynasty. I have him in another league. I think he's the better running back, and I would definitely go get him on your waiver wire. I've talked about it, I think, 2 weeks in a row on the waiver segment, so he needs to be a priority. My biggest point, I told you, my late addition to my boom bust team. And you know what sucks? We have the audio of this. So you can't go out there and say that I didn't say this. We have the audio on Friday's show where I said I was going to make Devonte Smith the flex spot on the boom team, my boom team. And I said, you know what? That's a little too easy. I want to challenge. I'm going to put Darnell Mooney up there. So I want to pat myself on the back a little bit because I believe before the season, you could correct me on this, Nick. I think Devonte Smith was my breakout or my sleeper or something. I did have him there. I could pull up that. I could pull up that audio too, so I do get some stuff right. But this week I was wrong on Darnell Mooney. I put him in. Jacoby Myers was my first option for my flex boom because great matchup against the Ravens and Devontae Parker reaped the rewards of that. Jacoby Myers didn't play. I put in Mooney. I wanted Devonte Smith, but anyway, took the challenge. I did say Darnell Mooney was a true boomer bust. He has the best possible matchup, and if he doesn't boom this week, he's probably not going to boom this season. I fall on the sword of Darnell Mooney. I was wrong. He did not boom. He had a bust. I think he has a total of like 10 fantasy points on the season. I mean, just today he had 2 receptions for 23 yards. That's like 4.3 fantasy points. He's droppable. If you have a 6-man bench, I think he's dropped. If you have an 8 or 10-man bench, you could keep him. But if you have a 6-man bench, he's dropped. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's show, but I was wrong on Mooney, and I have to say that one. Raiders at Titans. What do you got for me?
Derrick Henry, I told you I didn't say bench him, but I said temper your expectations, and he proved me wrong. The Raiders are really bad against the running back position.
They are really bad against the running back position.
They are awful. And my bigger takeaway for Henry isn't that he looked good on the ground because he really didn't. He had the same yards per carry as Damien Pierce.
I mean,
where he delivered.
To be fair, I want to cut in here because Nick was at the Jets game today. So I do want to be clear. Derrick Henry did look pretty good on the ground for the first half at least.
I was watching. Don't worry.
I thought for the first half he looked good. I thought he looked like old Derrick Henry.
Where he looked good was with his yards after the catch. So if Tennessee is going to continue to give him 5 catches, 6 targets, and 50 yards in the air, that's where you're going to see production, because the biggest worry we had with Derrick Henry wasn't him being efficient on the ground and scoring touchdowns. The concern was, will he have volume in the passing game? Because if you took out his passing load, and in week 1 and week 2, he had 0 catches. He had 1 target between those 2 weeks. If you take that out, he only has 14 points in this fantasy game, and you're disappointed in Derrick Henry as your first pick of your draft. But because they're involving him in the passing game is why he's going to deliver. I'm not sure if this is going to be a continuing trend for them, even though this is the best the Titans have looked when they have used him in the passing game. So I would recommend it to Mike Vrabel on that coaching staff, but I'm still very concerned about Henry, even though he did have this monster game.
I'm not super concerned because the next few matchups are the Colts, the Commanders, who allow a lot of points to running backs, Colts again, and the Texans. So I'm not super duper worried about
the
Derrick
Colts
Henry.
held the Chiefs to negative rushing yards, I believe, today, or very
The
close.
Chiefs don't run the ball. They don't.
They had 20 carries.
They don't run the ball. They don't have a Derrick Henry. It's different.
Okay.
Derrick Henry's a 1 of 1. They don't have a Derrick Henry.
We'll see.
Anyway, my biggest takeaway is that Robert Woods is alive. He catched 4 balls for 85 yards on 9 targets. I love the target number. This means he's still on your roster. It means that you could play with him in a flex spot if you really need to. You got to see where the target share goes in the next few weeks. We haven't gotten the Treylon Burks explosion yet, but my biggest takeaway is Robert Woods, who they signed to a new contract, is alive. Speaking of the Chiefs at the Colts, if you listen to our pregame show in the morning, Nick said put money on the Colts. Nick's not a bettor. I do a spread pool. I flip my pick to the Colts, and I got a pick right because of it. So good call on Nick. What is your biggest takeaway from a fantasy perspective from Chiefs and Colts?
It's kind of what I pounded the desk on before this week, saying there's really not going to be a Kansas City receiver that you can trust on a weekly basis. Now, Juju had an all right game. He had 13.9 points. That's solid. That's like middle of the pack for a wide receiver too, and that's what you should expect from him. But you did watch Patrick Mahomes once again spread the ball. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, 7 targets. Travis Kelce, of course, who will always have a monster workload in that offense. Sorry, my phone's not loading where I have the stat, but 8 targets. Juju Smith-Schuster, 8 targets. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, hold on, 5 targets. So what you are seeing is no Kansas City receiver dominating in the passing game. What Patrick Mahomes said is true. I'm not worried about the team. I'm not worried about their inability to score the ball. The Colts are a much better matchup than they let on a week ago. Clearly, Jacksonville is a better team than we thought. You saw it today and you saw it last week. So I'm not super concerned or I'm not overly confident in any of Kansas City's receiving options. I think all will consistently have fine days. And you might see some boom games, but for as many booms, you're going to see probably double the amount of busts.
My biggest takeaway is that the Chiefs and the Bills are very similar teams. They have high-powered offenses that don't run the ball. Your running backs can get touchdowns on the goal line, but as for rushing yards, it's just not going to happen. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 7 carries, 0 yards today. And I don't put that on the Colts defense. I put that on the fact that, even in the last few games against the Chargers, he had 74 rushing yards. That's an outlier number because 52 of those yards came on run. His other 7 carries only amounted for 20 rushing yards. In week 1, he had 42 rushing yards. One of those carries was 18 yards. He's averaging maybe 2 to 3 yards per carry. And I don't think it's a knock on Clyde Edwards-Helaire per se, but the Chiefs he's Devin Singletary. It's the same situation as the Bills. So you could start Singletary. He's a decent flex play. He's a running back 2 play if you went 0 running back, but I wouldn't expect much more than that. Speaking of those Buffalo Bills who lost, they lost today, and I'm excited to talk about this one. Bills at Dolphins. What is your biggest takeaway?
The one player that I saw a lot of preseason hype about that I wasn't fully buying into was Gabriel Davis. My biggest concern was he could not outshine Cole Beasley or Emmanuel Sanders last year. So with both of them leaving, why would I expect him to thrive on a weekly basis? And you saw it this week. You saw 6 targets, 3 catches, a good amount of yards. And after week 1, my biggest takeaway was Gabe Davis will be a good play most weeks if he can score a touchdown. And if you took away the touchdown from Gabe Davis in week 1, the stat line's pretty much identical to the stat line that you saw today. So he's wide receiver 2s on your team, as high-powered of an offense as the Bills are, will typically be touchdown dependent. You saw it today. Instead, you saw Isaiah McKenzie thrive, 9 targets out of the slot, 7 catches, 70 yards, and a touchdown. That's the kind of performance we would like to see from Gabe Davis consistently, but that offense is going to continue to spread the ball. And Davis, to me, hasn't solidified himself as the wide receiver 2 in that offense.
I'm going to hammer my point home again that they're just the Chiefs. Travis Kelce is Stephon Diggs, then Juju is Gabe Davis. They're the Chiefs. Because then there's other guys that can spread the ball to. Devin Singletary and 9 receptions on 11 targets. That's wonderful, but I don't see that happening every single week. If you played Singletary, you got a good game. My biggest takeaway, Tua is tough, like really, really tough. He got concussed today. Like there's no doubt in my mind that he was concussed. I don't know if you saw it. I
saw he was wobbly.
He was
wobbly.
He was waddling himself like a penguin off the field. It looked like when if a cop's testing you and see if you're drunk and you're doing I forget what it's called. What's the test called? And they make you walk in a straight line. Yeah, sobriety testing. They make you walk in a straight line. He couldn't do it. But then he came back out after the half and he won the game. He didn't play well from a fantasy standpoint. Like he's the quarterback. Geez, I have to scroll really far down. 20 maybe. I'm not even counting, but like I did bust him on the week. I was right on that one. But he didn't lose them the game. He played better than he did last year against the Bills. So 2 was tough. Also, Jalen Waddle, 4 receptions, 102 yards. Stud. Like I said at the beginning of the season, Tyreek Hill is not going to affect Jalen Waddle's production on this football team. The Lions at the Vikings. What do you got? Because I have some thoughts.
Which side do you have thoughts on? I'll take the other.
I have thoughts on the guy that I drafted in round 1 of 2 different leagues.
All right, you could go with that. Go ahead.
Dan Campbell, fuck off. Like, dude, why? You love DeAndre Swift. We love DeAndre Swift. It blows our minds when a catch happens or something, or they get them down to the 2, and then it's just like, there's number 30 in there. And there's like a collective groan from the fantasy universe. You could hear it. Everybody on Twitter, you see it, but you could hear the, and I'm starting to get worried. DeAndre Swift reportedly has a shoulder injury now. It doesn't seem like he's going to miss time, but now we got an ankle and a shoulder 3 weeks in. Jamal Williams carried him today. He also had more red zone looks. He had 2 touchdowns. Now I'm worried. I am now worried about DeAndre Swift. I'm not saying to trade him. I'm not saying he's going to bust. I'm not saying anything like that. The talent's still there. But I'm worried when before the season we're being told we want this guy to be a 1,000-yard rusher, 1,000-yard receiver. We want this guy to be the focal point of our offense. And then you're going out there and letting his touchdowns get vultured. I think I just think that's like a slap in the face. I know some of these guys are, playing for the team, and you should play for the team. This is a team sport. You shouldn't be worried about padding your stats like Mr. Unlimited over there at times. At least that's what the report says. But I just feel like if you're getting your team down the field and they pull you out right at the goal line, you don't even get one. Like, I get it. Like, if they ran Swift once at the goal line, doesn't get in, okay, put in the bigger back. But if you don't even give him one, I don't know. It's just like, maybe it's because I own him. It doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't seem right. And I would say the same thing about about other teams. Like so I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
I have a quick question just to follow up on that. So last year, very early in the season, we talked about Jamal Williams possibly being like a Kareem Hunt role in the offense where he's going to see some workload. It's going to vulture. It's going to have volume, but is it worth of a weekly start like Kareem Hunt is? So what's your thoughts on that?
I still think he's touchdown or bust. I mean, today, yes, he did out carry DeAndre Swift on a weekly basis. I mean, as long as Swift's healthy, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, I think Jamal Williams needs touchdowns for it to happen. Today he did have 24 fantasy points, 87 yards. That's great. The yardage there is great. Week 1, he had 2 touchdowns and 16 points. A touchdown is 6 points. So he had 4 points without the touchdown. Last week, no touchdown. he had 7 points, and one of those was 1 reception. So, I mean, I think he's a touchdown or bust kind of guy. And I think he's a guy that you play. Like, for me, if I didn't play Josh Jacobs today, I was going to play Khalil Herbert. Now, in most worlds, David Montgomery doesn't get injured. So let's say today, going into the game, I could play Khalil Herbert or Jamal Williams. I think I played Jamal Williams because he has the higher touchdown upside than Khalil Herbert. I played Jamal Williams over Alexander Madison because I'm assuming Cook doesn't get hurt. I don't think he's as good of a play as Hunt, but I think he's a decent play enough to where if you really need a running back too, you could play him knowing that he's probably got like a 50% chance at a touchdown.
I think that's a fair take.
I think he could end up being like James Conner last year. He has like 19 touchdowns. I don't think his rushing numbers will be up there, but I think he does have that opportunity to have 19 touchdowns. And I'm sorry, Dan Campbell. I shouldn't call you out because I do like Dan Campbell, but it's just like, come on,
Dan Campbell.
Yeah, I do love Dan Campbell.
It's disrespectful.
I apologize, Dan Campbell. I do like Dan Campbell a lot, but come on, give my guy Swift some more workload. Like, don't take him out of the 1 yard line. It kills me. What's your biggest takeaway from Lions Vikings?
Who's the wide receiver 1 over in Minnesota?
Should be Justin.
It wasn't the guy I took 3rd overall, and most people and was off draft boards by the 6th pick, because he was out targeted by KJ Osborne, Adam Thielen, and Irv Smith. That should never happen. That's a disgrace to the whole Vikings organization. There's a reason why you had to win against the Lions at the last second, and that's because you didn't just abuse the hell out of Justin Jefferson. For the last 7 years, the Vikings have always stayed relevant and been among the top scoring teams in the league because they were able to run the ball effectively and because they always used the wide receiver 1. Originally, Diggs, when it was Adam Thielen's turn, it came to Adam Thielen taking over, and now it's Justin Jefferson's turn to take over. Just feed the ball to Jefferson. Then you won't have to have a crunch time game against the Detroit Lions. It's ridiculous that he only had 4 fantasy points. He should not have this for the rest of the season, barring an injury early on in the game.
I'm with you on that. Ravens at Patriots. Biggest takeaway.
I warned you all about Rashad Bateman. He had 2 catches.
Was he on my bus team or yours? He was on one of our bus teams.
He was on my bus team.
He was on your bus team. Yeah. We both were not liking Rashad Bateman this week. But yeah, you
Belichick does one thing well. He takes away your biggest threat to him. And he thought the biggest threat was the deep pass and the deep ball. And he did limit it. Lamar did not. He passed well. He passed efficiently.
Bateman dropped 1 or 2. Like he had opportunities, I will say, but Belichick did a great job of scheming against him for sure.
But what he didn't do was scheme against Lamar Jackson, who had another game with 100 yards on the ground. He is looking just like MVP Lamar Jackson. I think Lamar at this point is the biggest steal of the draft at the quarterback position because
bigger than Hurts.
ADP Hurts, of course, too. But Lamar's the QB1 right now. And I feel like he was the biggest player that I watched drop on my fantasy boards at the quarterback position.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I would have talked about Lamar. You got Lamar ready. I'll speak about this guy. Belichick should know who the number 1 option over there is. And it was never Rashad Bateman. It was Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is being drafted around 2, maybe 3. And I think a lot of us thought that was a little bit early. Well, Mark Andrews, 2 touchdowns on 89 yards and 8 targets. He's doing exactly what he did last year. So far, he's the tight end 2 right now, right behind Kelsey. Kelsey is 36.2 points. Mark Andrews is 35.9. They're both averaging 18. Kelsey is 18.1. Mark Andrews is living up to the draft stock. Like, if you drafted him early, you drafted him as if you were drafting Travis Kelsey. Take away the name, like that's who you're drafting at this point, and I don't think that's changing for the rest of the season. I think if you're facing Mark Andrews, you have to be just as scared as if you were playing Travis Kelsey in the last 4 seasons. Bengals at the Jets. Oh man, I'm so excited to talk about this one, but I'm going to let you go first.
So the comp that I think everybody had on Joe Burrow was a young Tom Brady. I think that's really what everyone was saying last year, saying, oh, this guy's young, he's talented, he's not the most athletic, he doesn't have the deepest arm, but he finds a way to win. You want to know who Joe Burrow's reminding me of? Andrew Luck. He's reminding me of an arm talent that finds a way to move around the pocket, but is not going to make it long in this league because that offensive line was horrendous. Now, the Jets...
wasn't as bad today, I thought. How many sacks did they get?
They did not have a lot of sacks, but Joe Burrow, I highly recommend anyone go back and watch this game. And as a Jets fan that does not want to rewatch a Jets game, where they get smoked for quarter to quarter, like Burrow had to continually buy time against a not good pass rushing defense when he is going into these tougher matchups in that tough division where he is going to see TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, and all those other defensive studs that they're going to have to face this year. He is going to struggle. And if I'm the Bengals, I'm not holding my head very high after a win against the Jets. And they spread the ball to a lot of weapons. Like, they have the talent there, but the Bengals, in my opinion, did not look like the Super Bowl team that they were a year ago. I still see a hungover Bengals. And
what team do you think they were last year?
What team do I think the Bengals were last year?
Yes.
They were the team that beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship and went to the Super Bowl.
In a close, ugly game where Burrow did not look good until the fourth quarter.
Yes.
That's who they are. That is the Bengals team. They win ugly. That's who they are. They're the same team. They just don't have the wins. And last year, their record was 1-2 last year after 3 weeks. Last year, they lost to the Bengals and they lost to, I think, Jacksonville last year. They had 2 really bad losses.
They lost to the Jets last year.
Yeah, Jacksonville and the Jets, I think. They had 2 or 3 really bad losses. I'm just saying that
So my big takeaway for fantasy purposes is I'm extremely worried about the Bengals players and skill position players to deliver on a week-to-week basis for fantasy purposes. So I'm not saying fade them. It's why I don't like Higgins on the year, even though he did have a very good day. He looked incredible. But I'm not confident in any of them. If you could move off of a Jamar Chase at the first round value that he was going for, I'd be willing to.
Man, they look good today and they still have their top receivers. Anyway, Joe Burrow. I said it in my boom last week. I said, start Joe Burrow. He's facing the Jets. Joe Burrow. He's the 5th quarterback right now going into Sunday Night Football. I don't think that changes. I think he's going to end up being the 5th quarterback on the week. Puts him right behind Josh Allen. Not Josh Allen. Josh Allen's not first.
Josh Allen should be top 5. Should have been top 4.
Should he? I'm trying to figure out where. No, this. The list is not. There we go. Okay. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow. Great week. Great week. I knew it was coming. The receivers look good. T. Higgins did have that touchdown. He didn't, but the heel came down. I thought not a touchdown, but still 93 yards for T. Higgins. I think 9 receptions. No,
I think it was only 5.
It was a good amount of receptions.
It was 5 for 93.
5 for 93. Okay. 5 for 93. Could have had the touchdown. Jamar Chase also got a touchdown called back. This is the second time this season that Chase was like a pinky toe away from scoring another touchdown. My worry about the Bengals offense right now is Mixon. But as for the receivers, I know Nick's telling you to fade them. I would not fade them. They're going to be down in games, going to be close in games. They're going to throw a lot. Play guys against the Jets. It's going to be a tired take, but I'm just saying when a team's bad, you play your players against them. My Seahawks are horrible. I'll talk about the Falcons skill position players because I said to play them too. Eagles at Commanders. This was a whopping.
Hey, Nick.
What
I have to ask, did you learn your lesson?
Yep. My reverse jinx of Miles Sanders worked great. I wish I was
that's one lesson. Did you learn your other lesson?
Don't play Carson Wentz.
Did you learn your other lesson?
I didn't say to play Carson Wentz. What other?
Do not trust any receiver for Carson Wentz. It's ridiculous.
Well, hold on. Look at the stat
Miles
notes
Sanders,
because I was wrong about somebody.
Who are you wrong about?
Terry. I said not to play Terry.
Yes,
he had 6 receptions. He had 6 receptions and 100 yards. I was wrong. I busted him last week.
So my very simple takeaway is Miles Sanders is not trustable, and the Eagles are one of the top 5 teams in football right now, which just says they're going to continue to put up points on the board, and they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. So get your Eagles except for Miles Sanders. Play them week to week except for Miles Sanders.
Philly's going to host an NFC championship. It's amazing. My big takeaway is I keep talking about Hurts. I don't really want to talk about Hurts as a takeaway. He's great. He's just great. I forget who it was on the live stream yesterday that said he was trading and getting Jalen Hurts yesterday. And I said, go do it.
Yep.
He probably won his week.
And he traded Herbert. So yes, he did.
Devonte Smith and AJ Brown are a 1-2 punch. that's it. Like that's the bottom line. They're not 1 and 2. They are a 1-2 punch. Devonte Smith, 8 receptions, 169 yards and a touchdown. Last week he had 80 yards on like 7 receptions. AJ Brown today, 5 receptions, 85 yards and a touchdown. It's going to be really tough to cover both these extremely talented wide receivers and worry about Jalen Hurts rushing and worry about Dallas Goedert. They're both going to be great and they're both startable every single week. Saints at Panthers. What do you got? There's 2 really nice ones for you to talk about here.
I mean, there's ones I've been pounding the desk about.
You might as well talk about it. I mean, DJ Moore was on my bust team. You're the anti-DJ Moore guy, but he was on my bust team.
I'm going to spread the love. I'm going to allow you to talk about DJ Moore.
But I don't want to talk about DJ Moore. I want to talk about Chris Olave, who's on my dynasty team that had 9 receptions on 13 targets and 147 yards and has now become the wide receiver 2, maybe even 1 over there. His fantasy stats have been going on up in 3 weeks in a row now. Jarvis Landry is a thing of the past of week 1, and we're on to Olave now. So if you have Olave, he's a considerable spot flex starter every single week now. I'm not saying you lock him in because Jameis looks kind of funky, but Olave is on the flex radar. You probably have another good option, and you could debate the matchups, but I think you could set it. And even if he has like a dud 5 points, like I wouldn't be too upset about that because he has a proven track record now.
I hate Baker Mayfield. First off, you had 170 yards in this game, which I get it. New Orleans is a tough defense. Half of those went to Laviska Shenault. More than half, 90. So that means between Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, and the tight end over there, and other deep weapons that they used, like Shee Smith and Chuba Hubbard, you split your 80 other yards. I hate Baker. I hate him so much. And you know what I hate more? I hate Matt Rule. Give the ball to your bell cow running back.
He's so bad.
Give the ball to your elite wide receiver. It's the whole reason why I busted DJ Moore and why I said Baker has delivered monster seasons for running backs. Look at Nick Chubb, look at Kareem Hunt. The only team that managed to put up 2 top 20 running backs in the last 5 or 6 years. And he has both of them combined into one superstar talent back there. And he's not using him in the passing game. And it's pissing me off because Christian McCaffrey had another 100-yard rushing game, and it gets overlooked because if it's a PPR format, he's not delivering the monster.
What do you have, 14 fantasy points or something like that?
Exactly. He had 14 with 100 yards on the ground. That should not happen. Christian McCaffrey was averaging 8 to 10 targets a game 2 years ago.
I want to make this point. The running backs are not producing. They are not. They're not catching the ball. None of them are catching the ball. They're not producing. They're getting receivers are lapping them in points. All right. Jaguars at Chargers.
You go first. I got to cool down after my Baker.
All right. I have some opinions here, and I'll start with this one. It's going to be an opinion that I have about the Packers in a few minutes, but the Chargers are beaten up, and when Herbert's beaten up and when they're beaten up, they don't look great. They're not really playable players. Justin Herbert looked bad. He probably needed to sit today. It's crazy they had him in that game in the fourth quarter when they were down 20 points. They still have this dude out there that probably has 2 working ribs at the moment. I know ribs don't actually work, they're bones, but still the other ones are probably drooping down. Austin Eckler looked horrible. He did have a lot of receptions, but that saved his day. Rushing wise, horrible. Mike Williams saved his day with a touchdown. I didn't have him as a boom, but I was wrong on that. Touchdown saved his day. Joshua Palmer looked great, but Keenan Allen was supposed to play and he didn't. The pregame report from Schefter was that he was going to play and then he was ruled out. So the Chargers are beaten up with Keenan Allen with the hamstring that does linger. Justin Herbert has the rib thing. He should have sat and he didn't. I think one of their tackles was hurt. I could be wrong, but with them beaten up, they didn't look good. I think they need a week or 2 to get healthy. I wish I knew who they had this week off the top of my head, but they're going to be tough. Let's see real quick. Chargers schedule. Google very quickly. This is taking longer than I had hoped. Next week, the Chargers have get right game. The Texans. Never mind, you're playing your Chargers. All right, I want a different point now because now this stuff's not going to linger. Different point, tweaking it. James Robinson looked good. I'm a James Robinson guy. I picked him up 2 years ago, and then I traded him for Kelsey, and Nick ripped me apart for it and said James Robinson's just like some flyer player that's a nobody. James Robinson looked good, and he's coming off that ACL, which Dobbins is also coming off of, who did not look good. 17 for 101. He did have a 50-yard touchdown, but even if we take that away, he's 16 for 50 for 1. ETN looked pretty good too. He had 10 fantasy points without a chance of a touchdown. So the Jags overall look good, and James Robinson should be the bell cow of that team. And if you have James Robinson, it's probably one of those draft steals, just like his wide receiver next to him.
I'm gonna give Nick a little bit of a pop here. A little Thanos. I don't feel balance in the universe, because in what world are the Chargers with Justin Herbert getting absolutely smoked by the Jacksonville Jaguars?
In a world where the Jags are actually kind of decent without Urban Meyer, and the Chargers are pretty banged up.
First off, Trevor Lawrence looks good. Trevor Lawrence looks like a streaming option week to week. Next week he has Philly, which I don't think is a great matchup, but I didn't think the Chargers were a great matchup. And then he follows it up with Houston. I'm going to play Trevor Lawrence in leagues where I have Dak hurt, who will probably be out, where I have to stream him. I'd play him over Winston right now, because he just looks like a good quarterback. Right now he's the QB4. And like Nick said, I don't think Russell Wilson, Jimmy Garoppolo, Cooper Rush, or Daniel Jones is going to top him coming into these next 2 games.
He also passes a lot. He has 235, 237, and 262. Like, the only thing that's stopping is if he throws picks and doesn't throw touchdowns. But his last 2 games are 18 and 25. He looks good.
And on top of that, the whole Jags offense flowed. Zay Jones saw a massive workload. He was the wide receiver 1 on the team, and I think he had a top 6 performance on the week. Christian Kirk, another 20 fantasy point game. James Robinson, 20 fantasy point game. Marvin Jones, 14 fantasy points. Travis Etienne, 10 fantasy points. Like, everyone on Jacksonville's getting a piece of the action. It's what we wanted from the Kansas City Chiefs. It's what we wanted from the Buffalo Bills. It's what we wanted from the LA Chargers, and instead it's happening in Jacksonville. Makes no sense to me, but for right now, Christian Kirk, James Robinson, must-starts for me. Trevor Lawrence should absolutely be the number 1 streaming quarterbacks off these waiver wires, even with a tough matchup against Philadelphia. And Marvin Jones apparently seems to be playable, matchup dependent. So, and Travis Etienne seems like a good stash. James Robinson, I think, is going to keep pushing back that takeover, but Etienne looked good too. They have just a lot of talent and a well-coached team.
Out of the top 11 receivers on the week, we got Tyler Boyd, Devontae Parker, Isaiah McKenzie, Romeo Doubs, Zay Jones, Russell Gage, and Mac Hollins. It's funny.
It's unbelievable.
Falcons at the Shithawks. That's what they are. I'm taking this one. They're horrible. The Falcons looked just like they looked like an elite team out there. Cordell Patterson at a top 5 week.
You got Cordell Patterson.
We did. I think he had a top 5 week. He had to. He was number 5. Yep. Top 5 week of Cordell Patterson at 22 fantasy points. Marcus Mariota, we said he was a sneaky play this week. He finished as quarterback 12 or 13, like 15 points. That wasn't bad. Kyle Pitts is alive. I did say this was the week to play Kyle Pitts for sure. Kyle Pitts finished as the tight end 6 without a touchdown at 13.7 fantasy points. He had 87 yards and 5 targets. Drake London had an okay day. I think he had like 60 yards on 4 targets and a touchdown. I thought he could have had a bigger day, but that's okay. Great start for the rookie wide receiver, arguably the rookie of the year next to Olave. My point being, just like the Jets, I'm going to tell you every week to play your receivers and your offensive players against the Seahawks. I'm going to look up the Seahawks schedule now because I'm giving you a preview into my boom team next week. The Seahawks are versing the Lions. Oh boy, Amon-Ra St. Brown, start of the week. Jared Goff, start of the week. That's going to be my start of the week. What do you got? Seahawks and Falcons. I also want to note DK Metcalf. I told you to play him. 4 receptions, almost 60 yards and a touchdown. 18 fantasy points. So anyway, just wanted to note that one in there. Good pick by me for the boom team.
Also a good pick by me with Tyler Lockett, 9 catches, seeming to find a workload without Russell Wilson. Let Geno cook. My takeaway is also on the Atlanta Falcons side of the ball.
I just want to cut you off real quick here. I'm sorry. Geno Smith finished as quarterback 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 on the week.
325 passing yards and 2 touchdowns in the air. Phenomenal. Anyway, my takeaway is on Atlanta's side of the ball. Who has more touchdowns in their career, Drake London or Kyle Pitts? It is Drake London. I'm still not sold on Kyle Pitts. I'm sold on the talent. I'm not sold on his workload in this offense. I think that this is more it's more like the other side of the ball from recent years, where I think the DK in the lineup is Drake London, where I think he'll consistently put up numbers, he'll consistently have target share, where I think Kyle Pitts is going to be more like Tyler Lockett, where he's going to give you 5 massive yard, massive production games, and you hope he finds the end zone. That's kind of exactly what that dynamic is like over there. That's exactly what I think it's going to be like in Atlanta for the rest of the year, which means Kyle Pitts is a good play at the tight end position because he does have the potential to go for 20, 30 fantasy points any given week. I just think his floor of that 3.9 or 4.3, whatever it was that we saw for the past 2 weeks, is going to be a lot more consistent. He looked very good against this defense, but do I think he's going to look good against? Let's check their schedule real quick.
We need all
Tampa
the
Bay
on our teams.
No. Cleveland, no. San Francisco, no. Cincinnati, week 7, maybe. But that's 3 tough matchups in a row for Kyle Pitts. I'm not saying fade him, but expect a lot more of those 4 games than for Kyle Pitts' full breakout.
All right, Rams at Cardinals. My biggest takeaway, I was wrong about Hollywood Brown for this week. I was on the Hollywood Brown train for the entire offseason.
Yes,
I was. And you know what? He hasn't been bad. Like, as much as I wish he had performed a little bit more, his last 3 weeks are 14, 12, and then 28. But even if he averaged 15, it's a guy you probably drafted around 7 or 8. That's really not a bad number to average. That's a flex play, which is where you're drafting. He did have like 28 points today or 22, depending on your scoring format. I told you to, I don't know if I said bench. I said he's going to bust against Jalen Ramsey, and that's just not true. The Rams passing defense is definitely not good. It's 3 straight weeks where they've been a bottom 5, bottom 3 pass defense. Hollywood Brown had 14 receptions for 140 yards. This is kind of what I expected when I said to draft him in all your drafts. And he could have had a couple more. Like, Kyler missed him on a bunch. Yeah. Kyler was not sharp today. He could have had a couple more. He could have had a touchdown.
That offensive line stinks, though.
This could have been a 40-point day for Hollywood Brown that was closer to 28. But my point being, keep playing Hollywood Brown. I think when Hopkins comes back, he'll still be a really great option, and hopefully that offense gets going because Kyler looked rough out there. And Kyler's looked rough this season. He's not looked great. What do you got?
Cam Akers is back, question mark. He had out-carried Darrell Henderson.
I think he was back and then he fumbled, so now I don't know.
Yeah, so he had 12 carries, 60 yards, and a touchdown in comparison to Darrell Henderson's 4 carries for 17 yards. So a lot of question marks, a lot of running back by committee. I think it's going to depend on the matchup. I think they're going to rotate those running backs. I'm not confident in either of them. Cooper Kupp, his worst fantasy game, I feel like, in 2 years at 16 points. So floor, Cooper Kupp, still phenomenal, unlike Justin Jefferson, whose floor was 2 for 30 or for 20 today. So, but the big takeaway is, biggest red flag for me is still Allen Robinson on that offense. Allen Robinson's still creating separation, and Matt Stafford can't find a way to put the ball into his hands.
Now, he did drop that first touchdown. He should have had that touchdown.
He should have had the touchdown.
And I feel like Stafford stopped trusting him after that.
I think so. But
he's playing like 95% of snaps. He's always on the field. You could tell because he's the only guy wearing sleeves. He's always on the field.
I'm not sold on him. I feel like he's the 4th receiving option over there. Obviously, Kupp 1. Higbee, I know he didn't have the monster game or the massive workload that he did this week as either the first 2, but he's
still had 10 fantasy points without a touchdown.
Then he looks to check down to those running backs, and then he looks to a slot receiver. So it's Sko Ronak right now, but when Van Jefferson gets back, Van Jefferson might assume a higher role than Allen Robinson in the depth chart anyway.
Yeah,
so
we'll see.
Big red flag for him.
All right, Packers at Bucks. I'll start off this one. Romeo Doubs, he's here. I think kinda. We'll see what happens next week, but 8 receptions, 73 yards, a touchdown. He caught like 4 or 5 of those on the opening drive. Here's my biggest takeaway though: 8 receptions on 8 targets. He didn't drop a ball. There was nothing that was out of his reach, I guess. But he didn't drop one because, if a young receiver drops the ball, this is what you get from Rodgers. And you have to watch the podcast to get this part. It's an eye roll. It's an eye roll and a shrug, and it's a, come on, dude, catch the ball. I'm Aaron Rodgers. And that didn't happen because Romeo Doubs caught 8 for 8. I hope this means more snaps for Doubs. I hope this means more receptions for Doubs. I think he's a borderline flex option, especially in a 12-man league, but we got to wait and see. But that was my big takeaway for Dobbs.
Real quick, biggest takeaway also with Nick, 8 catches for, 60 yards? 70 yards
For
and a
Dobbs,
touchdown.
or 73, yep.
That's the only thing I want to take away from this game. That's it.
I was going to say all Bucks are not playable without the top receivers, but then Russell Gage is 10 for 80 and a touchdown. So I changed my mind on that take. One player can be playable, and I think it's whoever the number one wide receiver is, and I would prefer Russell Gage over Julio, honestly.
I agree.
So if Russell Gage is available on your waiver, Mike Evans will be back next week. So anyway, tough plays. That is all we got for you for a weekend recap. Sunday Night Football's happening as we speak, but we're going to get you out of here in a few minutes. Monday Night Football preview. If you have players playing tonight, we're going to give you their projection, tell you if we would go over under, if you have a chance of winning tonight. Some injuries. Kadarius Toney is doubtful to play. Wan'Dale Robinson is out. Michael Gallup is questionable. I think he's going to play. Dalton Schultz is questionable. I don't think he's going to play, and I honestly hope he doesn't play as a Dalton Schultz owner. None of those guys should be in your lineups because you shouldn't be worrying about injuries on Monday Night Football. For the Cowboys, let's start actually position by position. Let's go Cooper Rush for the Cowboys, 14.6 points, over or under?
He looked pretty good last week, but I think the Giants are a little bit more red hot. I'm not going to trust Cooper Rush to go put up fantastic numbers. He could hit the number, but if I had to guess over or under, I would go under. I don't think he should be started anywhere other than the
I would go under as well. He would need 3 touchdowns, I think, to get over this number. Daniel Jones, 15.7.
Here I'm going to take the over. I think that the Dallas defense is very good, but I think where they are susceptible is on the inside of the field, which is what the Giants have been pretty good with all year. So I think you're going to see a lot of checkdowns to Barkley. I think you're going to see run after the catch from those guys. But it's still Daniel Jones. Like, I don't think he's going to boom. I just think he could hit 15.7.
I think he's right at 15, so I'm going to go with under. I think it's a low-scoring game, and I think Micah Parsons going to have a day. I think the Cowboys' defense is one of the better ones in the league. I think it could be an under game for a lot of players. Running backs, Ezekiel Elliott, 13.8.
Whoever is the ESPN projection guy should be fired. Zeke has not had a good game without Dak Prescott in 3 years. Zeke belongs on the bench if you haven't all.
Zeke averages 8 points without Dak Prescott. Like that's not even me just joking. He averages 60 yards and like 1 reception. So, and his touchdown numbers aren't great. Like I'm not joking. Like you could look this up. He averages less than 10 points. So this is an under for me, unless he scores a touchdown. And a lot of these are touchdown or bust, but if he scores a touchdown,
even if he scores a touchdown with that 60 number, he's under. So yeah, I still wouldn't bet on him breaking it unless Jones gives him a bunch of turnovers.
Let's go to Tony Pollard, 11.5. I'm going to go under for the fact that I think he could catch at least 5 balls here and run for, if he catches 5 balls and runs for 30 yards, that's 8 points right there. I think he could rush for 30 and score a touchdown even. So I'm going to go with the over for Tony Pollard.
I'm going to go with the under here as well. I don't trust him to repeat what he did last week. I don't trust him to be a weekly start. Zeke still eats up so much of those carries.
Didn't Hilliard have a good game against the Giants, though, week 1?
He did. Hilliard did have a good game.
And a lot of that was in the air, I believe. I could be wrong, though. I think it's mostly in the air. So I don't know. I would take the over, though. Nick's going to take the under. How about Saquon Barkley, 17.9?
I hope it's under because I have a matchup depending on if Saquon scores 14 points or not. But unfortunately, my fantasy cap is on, and I would say he probably gets over that.
I'm just going to say the under because I think it's an under game. I know I'm not fun right now. I'm going all the unders, but it's a lot of points. And I feel like no running back has hit this. I got distracted by the TV. Jeff Wilson just ran for like 40 yards. And I actually need him to play well today, I think. I don't know. I can't remember all my matchups. Anyway, Saquon Barkley is my under. Let's go to the receivers. CeeDee Lamb, 13.3. I'm going over because somebody has to catch balls over there. Like they need him to play well. So I'm gonna go with the over. I don't think the Cowboys win this game without him catching a good amount of balls.
I don't think the Dallas Cowboys win this game, period. Last week he had 15 points with 7 catches on 11 targets for 75. And that was against a much worse secondary in Cincinnati. I'm gonna go with under, but not by too much.
Okay. Noah Brown, 8.4. I'm going to go with under. I think he's getting around like 40 yards and maybe like 2 or 3 catches. So I'll go with under.
I'm smashing the over on this one. I think he's a must start if you have.
Nick's a lot
And
higher
he
than
made a
that
Monday
on.
night miracle last week. Five targets, 5 catches, 91 yards, touchdown. Week before, 9 targets, 5 receptions, 68 yards. Both of those weeks outscore this one. Cooper Rush has worked with him on the practice squad for 2 or 3 years now. He's the one guy he has a lot of trust in. He's going to look for him on third down. He's going to look for him in the end zone. And without Dalton Schultz there, the reliable tight end blanket, I think that he's going to be his safest option, in his head at least.
Okay. Sterling Shepard, 11.3. I actually like this over. I think Shepard's increased his fantasy value over the past 2 weeks. And I think that continues. Daniel Jones does have chemistry with him. I was in on Daniel Jones and Shepard 2 seasons ago, but they just keep getting hurt. But Daniel Jones trusts him, so I'm going to go with Shepard with an over.
Last week, 10 targets, 6 catches, only 40 yards. I think that number goes up this week. I think he's able to smash through that 11.3. I hope it's 40 because that's what I need to win a league.
What about Richie James at 9.9? I'm going to let you go first on this one.
I only put him in here because my brother is rostering him. So I had to put him in here and just say there's absolutely no way he does it. And if he does do it, then I deserve a text saying, haha, I told you so.
All right. I'll go the under as well. Kenny Golladay at 6. I'm also going with the under. The only giant receiver I want to play is Sterling Shepard.
With no Wan'Dale Robinson and no Kadarius Toney this week, I feel like he would have to go over. But I could see Brian Dable sending a message to that locker room and leaving him on the bench.
Oh, so. Brandon Ayuk just scored. That's going to lose me a fantasy week. Great. Anyway, that is our Monday show. Thank you guys for listening and or watching. If you enjoyed the show and you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe and like button. We'd appreciate that. Definitely. If you're listening on iTunes, give us a 5-star rating and a review. We would love that. Thank you so much. If you're listening on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, please subscribe, download, listen to all our shows throughout the week. Our Tuesday show tomorrow is strictly waiver wire and some injury updates. You don't want to miss that one because the waiver wire is going to be a tough one this week. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you guys win all your matchups tonight. Hopefully you come out of week 3 as victors. I hope we do. And we'll talk to you tomorrow to help you set your waiver wires.